Hello and welcome to PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Blair Malloy and I'm joined today by Luke Entwistle from Get French Football Now, a French football expert based in Nice, to look ahead to Rangers versus Lyon this Thursday. Luke, it's great to have you here on PLZ Soccer. Starting off, Lyon, they've had a bit of a mixed bag this season, currently 11th in Ligue, but winning their first Europa League game 2-0 against Olympiacos. What's the view of the side in France just now?
So I think it's very mixed. What we had last year was Lyon having that very renowned, awful start to the campaign. The first half was awful. They looked like they were in relegation trouble. John Textor, the owner, almost signed Everton, of course, was in a bit of denial about that, didn't really want to admit that there was any relegation trouble. And then what you had was Pierre Sage come in, and he came just promoted through the academy and completely changed the fortunes of the club. In the second half of the season, no team in Ligue got more points than Lyon, and obviously that led to high expectations going into this season, because if you outscore PSG the second half of last season, everyone says, well, why can't you do that again this season? So you have quite a lot of expectation placed on Pierre Sage's shoulders. Textor being very outward and saying that we should be looking at winning the title. I remember speaking to Jake O'Brien at the end of last season saying, we're Lyon, we should be looking at the title, but they've started this season more like they started last season rather than how they ended last season. So what we've seen is some very chaotic games, many goals conceded, and this kind of this very mixed bag of they can score goals and they can create chances, and we've seen that quite frequently, but they're so open and they're so liable to conceding goals that really those expectations that were there have kind of tapered off a little bit. Especially after the defeat in the Olympico against Marseille. Marseille went down to 10 men in the 5th minute of that game, and yet still went on to win the game 3-2. So, those kind of results, especially against a rival, those kind of results do mean that those expectations that there were have decreased quite significantly.
I think objectively there does look to be a few household names in this Lyon team, especially in the front areas. Who are their key men that come into Ibrox this week?
I mean, it's still Alexandre Lacazette. You referenced some of those key figures, and there's lots of exciting names on the page, like Gift Orban, who people might remember almost got that move to the Premier League. George Mikotadze, who finished as joint top scorer in the European Championships earlier this year. But really, in terms of that front line, it is really still Lacazette who's getting the lion's share of the goals, which the idea was to share the goals out a little bit more this season. That's not yet happening. Mikotadze has had a really difficult start against Toulouse last week. He looked really lost, actually. So a few concerns about how this forward line is kind of functioning. And then beyond that, you've got your wingers. And your wingers, I think there's real promise out in the wide areas like Malik Fofana and especially Ernest Nuama, but I think both of those are very inconsistent. Nuama, I think on his day is maybe the big threat that one to look out for, but he's not really got into his rhythm as he did in the second half of last season. So we'll see how he performs, but he's not currently at the level that he was last season.
One of the players that a few Rangers fans might be surprised to see lining up at Ibrox might be Wilfried Zaha. How has that move worked out on loan from Galatasaray thus far this season?
Thus far, not very well. He arrived not in his peak form, very far from it, and he actually only got on the pitch, I believe, for the first time against Toulouse at the weekend. So there's been a lot of, when he arrived, I think there's a little bit of surprise as to how far off he was physically from being able to not only start, but also just get in the squad. So he featured in the Europa League, and then he's kind of getting into the rhythm with league football as well. But a very quiet start. He has got an assist to his name. He came on and got an assist straight away against Olympiacos, a match that you referenced. But yeah, it's been a timid start, but he could pick up steam quite quickly because of the player that we know that he is. And really, the reason for his slow start it is purely a fitness issue. I'm not sure if he will be fit enough to start against Rangers. My assumption would be that he will try and make an impact off the bench. I'd expect probably Malik Fofana to start out on the left, but there's so much unpredictability in this Lyon side. I mean, anyone can start at any time in any formation. In the very few games we've seen this season, we've seen every formation under the sun deployed by Lyon. 2 strikers, 3 strikers, 1 striker, 2 attacking midfielders, 1 attacking midfielder, 2 wingers, no wingers, back 3, back 4, 1 midfield pivot, 1 midfielder, 3 midfielders. Any single formation that you can think of, you can probably count on Lyon having tried it at some point this season. And it's yielding some interesting results, especially going forward. And Zaha could benefit from that in the long run, because I think that he maybe isn't quite the player we remember him from Crystal Palace, but I think he still has a lot to give. I think it's more going the other way and defending that all this uncertainty is kind of having a real effect on the side.
You've just spoke about it there, the inconsistencies in terms of formation. Can you put your finger on how Lyon will set up and how they'll come to play this week?
My assumption would be he's tried many things. He's tried a 3-5-2. I have a feeling he may go slightly more conservative. I'd be expecting a back 4. I'd be expecting 1 striker rather than 2. He's tried Lacazette with Mikatadze. He's tried Lacazette with Gift Orban. But I would expect maybe for him just to go with Lacazette and with 2 wingers, and maybe a more settled, slightly more conservative midfield 3 of maybe bringing back in Nemanja Matic, another former Premier League player, of course. He continues to actually be quite a key player despite his years. And then maybe, you current into Tolisso maybe in there, probably Maxence Cacré as well. I would expect a slightly more conservative approach.
You touched on the manager, Pierre Sage, there. Obviously going through 3 different managers, I believe, last season. He's now come in. Is there a stability now that he's taken on and seems to be in the role?
So he arrived initially on an interim basis and did extremely well. And it was only actually relatively late in the summer that Lyon confirmed that he would be staying on an actual permanent basis. It was a surprise that it took that long, really, but it happened nonetheless. I think that there's already a little bit of pressure on Pierre Sage because of the investment, again, which was very, very significant this summer, despite some kind of financial restrictions or restrictions that could come in because he needed to sell 100 million euros worth of players and didn't get anywhere near that figure. So there was a few departures, but some really big money rivals that we weren't expecting, but most of them haven't quite worked yet. Moussa Niakate being one of them, but most of all probably George Mikatadze, because he had the largest expectation. And it feels as though if he can't get the best out of those players, then that pressure will only increase. And it seems as though this talk of Textor already getting involved, saying, I want him to play, I want him there, I want this player to be more prominent, I want him to be less prominent. These kind of things, which never really bode well. I think that Sage has accrued a lot of credit for what he did last year, and that should easily see him to the mid-season mark. But we'll see beyond that whether that credit will kind of run out, because at some point it may do, especially if they find themselves in a position like they do now in the lower or very much the mid-table region, when the aspiration was to challenge right at the top, at least get back into the Champions League. So yeah, stability, yes, but it's always, it's always linked to results. And if the results aren't there, and the results currently aren't there, then that stability it comes into question once again, I would say.
You're obviously out there in Nice just now, as I mentioned. What is, if at all, the French public and the French press reaction towards Rangers? How are they looking upon this game, and what do they think Rangers will have to offer?
So obviously, as you referenced, I'm down in Nice, so I remember Philippe Clement well from his time at AS Monaco. There's not too much of a view at Rangers. I think that they've seen their start to the season, seen it's not been maybe as positive as it was in the first few weeks, first few months of Clement's tenure, but I think there's a caution. There's that victory obviously in the Europa League to start off with. They don't have many household names or names that really French fans or the French media recognise to a great extent. But Philippe Clement is a personality. He's a manager who everyone is aware of. And whilst it didn't quite go his way at Monaco, I think that there's this acknowledgement that he can have a big short-term impact on a club. And I think we're still just about in that short-term impact. We saw what he did at Monaco in his first 6-7 months, which was not quite miracle work, but it's very, very impressive body of work that he kind of accrued during that first half season that he was there. So I think there's a wariness of this Rangers side that, despite not having really household names or names that are recognised over here, that they maybe have a good manager at the helm and one that can spring a bit of a surprise.
And if you were to give Rangers fans some positivity going into this game, where are the areas that they can really get after Lyon and potentially get a positive result on Thursday night?
So many areas. I can give you many doses of positivity. I mean, if you anyone who watched the weekend game against Toulouse, which somehow they miraculously won 2-1. You've never seen. I think they had one shot on target all game. Win that game 2-1. The XG for Lyon is minuscule, quite high for Toulouse. Toulouse had so many dangerous situations, so many 3-on-3 situations, so many 3-on-2 situations. Their weakness is that they don't have a striker. And that is obviously a big issue for Toulouse, is that they don't have a striker that can put those chances away. But I would be looking at this Lyon team as wide open, especially in transition. Even if you're winning the ball within your own third, there's just absolutely acres of space to exploit in midfield and to advance the ball and to get into situations where you are in these 3-on-3s on the back line. I think that's why we might see a back four and a little bit more conservatism. But I think that in transition in particular, this Lyon side's rest defence is absolutely non-existent, really, and is the spaces to be exploited all over the pitch. So lots of room for optimism for at least creating chances. Obviously, it's about finishing them, but I think that they can really create some really good chances and quite consistently. And then when you look at the goalkeeper in Luca Perry in goal, he replaces Anthony Lopez, a bit of a club legend. He is actually Lopez still at the club, but Perry has not convinced at all since coming from South America. It looks very vulnerable, especially in the air from corners. So lots of room for optimism for Rangers.
And just quickly look, if I can push you on a score prediction for Thursday night.
Oof. I think the only predictable element of this game is that there will be goals. I'm going to go for a 3-2 to Lyon.
Brilliant. Look, thanks for joining us today on PLZ Soccer. And don't forget, for all the latest breaking news and content, subscribe to our YouTube channel.